12 guards couldn't control the mafia boss's black stallion. The pregnant maid fed it from her palm. The sea roared against the cliffs as storm clouds gathered above the fortress. Its black towers jutted into the sky like jagged teeth, defying the wind and rain. Lightning danced across the horizon, illuminating the twisted stone walls and the banners that flapped violently in the gusts. The fortress was feared by all who lived nearby. Tales whispered of the man who ruled it, Lucian, the mafia-like lord whose name alone could summon dread. Yet there were rumors that the darkness surrounding him was more than mere cruelty. Some said it was tied to the creature he kept, an immense black stallion, untamed, untouchable, and bound to his very soul. Within the fortress, 12 guards had tried countless times to control it. The beast towered over them, eyes glowing like molten obsidian. Hooves struck the stone floors with thunderous force, tossing men aside as if they were toys. Weapons were useless. Fear alone ruled the stallion's domain. And yet, for all its fury, the horse seemed to possess a strange intelligence, as if it could sense weakness, doubt, or a heart that dared to speak softly to it. On a rainy morning, the fortress gates creaked open to admit a newcomer. She was not a warrior, nor a noble seeking favor. She was a maid, her dress simple and her eyes calm, though heavy with an unspoken story. Her name was Serena. She carried herself with quiet dignity, and a soft roundness of her belly told anyone who looked that she carried life within her. Rain clung to her dark hair, and her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear of the storm, but from the weight of entering a place where power and violence coiled in every shadow. The guards eyed her with suspicion. She moved slowly, hands clasped in front of her, and nodded politely to those who stood in her path. "The mistress asked me to attend the stables," she said, her voice low yet steady. "I am here to care for the black stallion." At her words, the guards exchanged glances. One snorted. "No one controls that beast," he muttered. Not even the Lord himself. Serena did not flinch. She simply nodded and followed the path to the stable. The fortress seemed to close in around her. The wind howled like a chorus of angry spirits, and the stone walls echoed with secrets she could not yet hear. Somewhere in the distance the stallion stirred, a low rumble vibrating through the air, as if it could sense her presence. When she entered the stable, the smell of hay, sweat, and storm-soaked stone filled her senses. There, in the largest stall, stood the creature. Its coat was blacker than night, glistening with rain and sweat, and its eyes were deep pools of fire and shadow. Its mane fell in waves like liquid darkness, and its breath came in hot, trembling clouds. Serena froze for a moment, her hand rising slowly to rest over her belly, as if to remind herself of the life she carried and the courage she must summon. The stallion reared suddenly, tossing a guard to the ground. He shouted, trying to calm it, but the horse pawed the stone floor with such force that dust and splinters flew into the air. Another guard swung a rope, attempting to catch it, and failed. The beast's growl echoed like thunder. Fear and awe filled the stable. And then Serena stepped forward. "Shh," she whispered, her voice soft, almost a breeze. She extended her palm, steady despite the chaos. "It's all right. I mean no harm." For a heartbeat, the stallion's fury faltered. Its ears twitched. It studied her, nostrils flaring, and yet it did not charge or strike. Serena took another step, slow and careful, until her hand rested lightly against the creature's nose. The stallion trembled, snorted, and then, as if sensing the life she carried, the innocence and courage that came from protecting another, it bowed its great head. The guards gawked. 12 of them had failed. Yet a single pregnant maid had calmed the impossible. None of them understood how, and perhaps they never would. From the shadows, Lucian watched. He had been silent until now, his tall figure framed by the doorway, his eyes like storm clouds themselves. His face was handsome, sharp, and cold, yet there was a flicker in his gaze, something unfamiliar. Surprise, and perhaps longing. He had never seen anyone approach the stallion with such fearlessness, such gentle command. And more than that, she did not fear him. The lord of this fortress, the man whose name brought trembling to hearts. You calmed it, Lucian said, stepping forward. His voice was low, edged with caution. No one has done that. Serena looked up, meeting his gaze without flinching. I only offered it kindness, she said. It responded in kind. A tense silence fell. The storm outside rattled the windows, yet inside, time seemed to pause. Lucian's lips curved slightly, not in a smile, but in contemplation. He had been raised to command with fear, to bend both men and creatures to his will. And yet, here was proof that power could take many forms. This tiny, unarmed maid, pregnant and gentle, had achieved what he, with all his strength, could not. Perhaps it is not strength that binds it, he murmured, more to himself than to her. Perhaps it is something else. The stallion shifted beneath her hand, stamping once and then leaning closer to her. Serena hummed softly, a sound like a lullaby, and the horse's eyes softened, the tension in its muscles melting. She fed it a handful of oats from her palm, and the creature ate with careful trust. Lucian stepped closer, and Serena did not recoil. Her calmness was a challenge, an unspoken invitation to see the world differently. Lucian felt an ache he had not known, an ache of loneliness, of regret, of longing for something he could neither name nor claim. You are brave, he said finally, his voice rough, betraying a rare vulnerability. Or perhaps foolish. Serena tilted her head, considering him. Perhaps. But sometimes courage is the only choice we have. The wind howled louder outside, and the storm's fury mirrored the tension inside the stable. The guard shifted uneasily, sensing the subtle shift in power, not of muscle, but of heart. For the first time, Lucian felt that someone could challenge him without defiance, without anger, without rebellion. She simply existed, and her presence unsettled him more than any fight could. A distant rumble shook the fortress, and the stallion shivered. Serena instinctively stepped closer, shielding it with her body. It fears something, she whispered. Something coming from the dark. Lucian's jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed as he looked beyond the stable doors into the storm-laden sky. He felt the pulse of something ancient, something tied not only to the beast, but to the curse that had shadowed his life for years. Serena's touch had calmed the stallion, but had it also awakened something? The horse lifted its head and whinnied, a sound that echoed through the fortress like a summons. The walls trembled, and the guards instinctively drew back. Serena's grip on the oats faltered, and she glanced at Lucian, fear flickering briefly in her eyes. He moved forward, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder, not to stop her, but as if to anchor himself. It is not just the stallion that senses it, he said, voice tight. Something is coming, something we cannot yet see. Serena nodded, her hand still resting against the creature.
Then we face it together, she said.
Her voice, soft yet unwavering, carried a quiet authority that even Lucian felt could not be ignored. For a long moment, the three of them, the pregnant maid, the Dark Lord, and the impossible stallion, stood in silence. The storm raged around them, but within the stable there was a fragile calm. It was a calm built not on fear nor obedience, but on trust. A trust earned in a heartbeat. And in that moment, Lucian realized something he had never admitted, even to himself. This woman, small and fragile in appearance, carried a power he could not command, could not understand, and yet it drew him in like the pull of the tide. The stallion had bowed to her. Perhaps he thought with a shadow of fear and hope she might even bend the darkness in him. Outside, the storm began to subside, leaving only the distant crash of waves and the soft patter of rain on stone. Serena fed the stallion until its hunger was sated, her movements gentle and steady. Lucian watched from the shadows, the weight of his own pride and solitude pressing against him, yet softened by something he could not name. As night fell over the fortress, the black stallion lowered its head to Serena's shoulder, a gesture of trust that had never been offered to another soul. Lucian stepped back, the first flicker of warmth touching the coldness of his heart. But the storm was not over. Not yet. Somewhere beyond the cliffs and beyond the fortress walls, a shadow stirred, ancient, patient, and hungry. And in the heart of the stable, Serena held out her palm, feeding not just a creature of darkness, but perhaps, unknowingly, a fragment of the fate that would bind her to Lucian forever. The fortress seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move. And Lucian, for the first time in years, felt fear and longing, curled together in the pit of his chest. The fortress was quieter the morning after the storm. Rain had left silver streaks across the black stone walls, and the wind still whispered through the towers like a secret only the brave dared to hear. Inside the stable, the black stallion stood calmly, its enormous head lowered toward Serena as she arranged fresh hay. The creature's eyes, once pools of molten fire, now softened under her gentle touch. She hummed a quiet tune, one her mother had sung long ago. A lullaby carried across lands she had never returned to, but never forgotten. Lucian watched from the doorway, his hands folded, a shadow of uncertainty in his sharp gaze. He had spent years mastering fear and respect, bending both men and beasts to his will. And yet here was this small, pregnant maid, shaping the impossible with nothing but calm hands and patience. He felt a strange unease, a pull that unsettled the fortress and his own carefully built walls. Serena looked up from the stallion and caught his gaze. "You watched again," she said, voice soft, almost teasing, yet it carried no accusation. I wanted to see if it would strike," Lucian admitted, his tone rough around the edges. "But it did not. Why does it trust you?" Serena smiled faintly, brushing a damp lock of hair behind her ear. "Perhaps it senses that I mean no harm. Or perhaps it knows I understand fear and hope at the same time. Sometimes creatures, like people, respond to what cannot be seen." Lucian frowned, stepping closer. He could feel the warmth of her presence like sunlight through storm clouds, yet it unnerved him. "And what of you?" he asked quietly. "Do you understand me?" Her eyes met his, steady and unflinching. "Perhaps," she said. "But understanding does not always mean agreeing, and trust does not always come quickly, even to those who need it most." The stallion shifted beneath her hand, nudging her gently with its massive nose. Serena leaned forward instinctively, letting the beast sniff her hair. Lucian watched, a tension twisting in his chest. He had spent years commanding, controlling, and fearing loss. Yet this woman, by existing beside a creature that even he could not tame, threatened to unravel everything he had built. For days, Serena cared for the stallion in silence, speaking softly and feeding it from her palm. Each act drew Lucian's attention further into her orbit. He found himself lingering near the stable, lingering in corners of the fortress he had never occupied. He watched her patience, her quiet strength, and the way the stallion's fear seemed to melt beneath her hands. He had never known the fortress to feel so alive. Shadows that once signaled threat now seemed like curtains to a hidden world he had almost forgotten. The world of gentle moments, of care, of hope. Yet, despite her calm demeanor, Serena carried a weight in her eyes, a hint of sorrow she could not fully hide. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, Lucian approached her as she brushed the stallion's mane. "You carry a heavy burden," he said quietly, careful not to startle her. Serena paused, brushing her hands over the dark mane. "And you carry one too," she replied. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the air like a quiet command. "Everyone does. The difference is how we bear it." Lucian swallowed, his pride bristling at the words and yet unable to deny their truth. He had ruled with power, demanding obedience from all who crossed his path, but he had never allowed anyone to see the loneliness he carried, the emptiness that gnawed at his chest when silence fell. Serena turned to him then, her hand lingering on the stallion's nose. "Do you ever wonder if power is enough?" she asked. "If fear is enough? I've seen men command armies, and I've seen beasts break them at a heartbeat. Power is not the same as control, and control is not the same as trust." Her words struck Lucian like a sudden wind. He wanted to argue, to assert that fear had value, that control was his life's anchor, but he could not. There was a truth in her words that reached beyond argument, The black stallion had bent only to her, not to his strength, not to his wealth, not even to his name. That night, he lingered longer than usual in the stable. He watched her feed the stallion, watched the way she hummed, the way her eyes softened when it nuzzled her shoulder. He wanted to speak, to offer words of admiration, but each time he opened his mouth, a deeper uncertainty gripped him. He was unused to humility, to vulnerability. And yet, he could not look away. Days passed, and a bond began to form, not between the Lord and the Maid, nor between master and beast, but a quiet understanding that drew all three closer. Serena seemed to see into the heart of the stallion, and into the heart of Lucian, in ways that frightened and intrigued him at once. One morning, a messenger arrived, bearing news from distant lands. Lucian read the letter silently, his face darkening. "There are men who wish to take the fortress," he said finally. "Rivals who will not hesitate to kill. And they have sent spies already." Serena's eyes widened. "You cannot face them alone," she said. "And the stallion, it will sense danger." Lucian's jaw tightened. "It is not a horse I fear. It is betrayal, disloyalty, weakness." "But you trust me," Serena said softly. "And the stallion trusts me." "Perhaps trust is stronger than fear, even in your fortress." Her words hung in the air like the scent of rain before a storm. Lucian felt something stir within him, a realization that trust, fragile and human, was a power he had never truly wielded. And yet, he did not fully understand it, could not admit it, and feared it all the same. The following night, the fortress fell silent under the new moon. Lucian patrolled the outer walls and Serena remained in the stable, the black stallion beside her. A sudden cry echoed through the halls, a warning from one of the guards. Shadows moved where no light should fall. The enemy had arrived, or perhaps the spies had set their plan into motion. The stallion's ears twitched, and it stamped the floor, nostrils flaring. Serena placed a hand on its massive shoulder, whispering calm words. "It's all right. We will face it together." Lucian appeared behind her, silent as the night. "Together," he repeated, his voice low. He did not ask for permission. He merely stated the word, a bond forming that he had never known before. Suddenly, a figure darted into the stable, a masked intruder, moving quickly towards the stallion. Serena stepped in front of the creature instinctively, raising her hand. The stallion reared, blocking the intruder. But instead of striking, it waited, tense, as if guided by the maid's calm presence. Lucian moved with precision, a shadow among shadows, disarming the intruder without drawing blood. Serena's eyes shone with relief, yet she did not relax completely. "They know we are here," she said, her voice steady. "And they will not stop." Lucian glanced at the stallion, then at her. "You should not have been here alone," he said, though the words felt hollow even to him. He was the Lord, yet it was Serena who had drawn the creature, who had calmed it, who had faced danger without fear. Serena met his gaze. "And yet we survived," she said. "Together." The black stallion nickered softly, pressing its head against her hand, as if affirming her words. Lucian felt a stirring in his chest, a recognition that strength could come from gentleness, courage could come from trust, and power could exist without fear. But the night was not yet over. From the darkness beyond the walls, faint sounds of movement reached them. More than a single intruder. More than mere spies. The fortress held secrets older than Lucian himself. And perhaps, Serena thought, some of those secrets had been waiting for someone like her to awaken them. Lucian's eyes narrowed, a mixture of determination and something more dangerous. Curiosity, fascination, longing. "They will not touch this fortress," he said, voice steady. "Not while I draw breath." Serena's gaze softened, and she touched the stallion's mane, feeling the pulse of life and power through its body. "Not while we stand together," she said, and the words carried more weight than any weapon or army. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying whispers of distant storms and shadows moving closer. The black stallion stamped the ground once more, alert yet calm. and Serena's hand remained on its neck, steadying both beast and heart alike. Lucian watched her, and for the first time he wondered what it would mean to surrender. Not to anyone, not to fear, not even to love, but to trust. To trust enough to face not only enemies, but the shadows within himself. A sudden gust of wind rattled the doors, and a shadow passed across the moonlight. Serena stiffened, and the stallion bristled. Lucian moved to stand beside her, and in that shared silence they understood. Danger was coming, but so too was change. The fortress, the stallion, the maid, and the Lord, all would be tested. And in the dark of that night, with the rain-soaked wind carrying a warning through the fortress halls, Serena realized something she had not expected. The bond she shared with the Black Stallion, and perhaps even with Lucian, was no longer simple trust. It was a force that could challenge curses, command hearts, and alter fates. But whether it would save them or destroy them remained a question the storm had yet to answer. The night air was thick with mist as Serena stepped beyond the fortress walls. The Black Stallion's hooves echoed softly on the wet stones, the only sound besides the distant crash of waves against the cliff. Her hand rested instinctively on her belly, the life within her reminding her that every step she took was not only for herself, but for the future she carried. She moved with careful determination, guided by a whisper she could not fully understand, a call from somewhere deep in the forest beyond the fortress, where shadows twisted and trees loomed like silent sentinels. Lucian followed quietly behind, his boots silent on the moss-covered ground. He had offered no words, no questions. He simply moved, drawn by a force he could not name, compelled by the quiet power of the maid who had tamed his storm-black stallion. The fortress, once his kingdom of fear and control, felt distant here. In the forest, under the silver light of the moon, the shadows seemed to hum with secrets. Serena stopped at the edge of a clearing. The mist swirled around her, and in the center, the Black Stallion halted as if sensing the shift in the air. Its dark eyes reflected a strange light, one that was not from the moon. Serena extended her hand, whispering softly, "It's all right." "We have not come to harm." The stallion lowered its head, sniffing the mist with caution. Then, a sudden rustle came from the trees, sharp and deliberate. Serena froze, and so did the horse. Lucian's hand moved to the hilt of a dagger he had never drawn before, not because he feared attack, but because he was prepared to defend her. His sharp gaze scanned the forest, noting the way the shadows twisted unnaturally, the way the wind seemed to carry voices that weren't there. Then, through the mist, a glow appeared. A pool of silver light formed on the forest floor, pulsating gently. The Black Stallion's muscles tensed, and Serena stepped forward, her hand extended as if she could reach into the light and understand it. "This is what called me," she whispered, voice trembling just slightly.
"I felt it in the fortress, in the stallion, in you."
Lucian frowned, moving closer. "What is it?" he demanded. "What magic is this?" Serena shook her head. "I do not know, but I feel I must go forward." The Black Stallion neighed softly, stepping into the glow. Serena followed, placing her hand lightly on the creature's mane. The pulse of the light seemed to match her own heartbeat, a rhythm that bound her, the horse, and even Lucian in an invisible thread of fate. As she reached the center of the clearing, a vision unfolded before her eyes. Not a dream, not a trick of the mist, but a memory she did not remember living. Shadows of Lucian's past flickered before her, the fortress in flames, men kneeling under his command, and the stallion in chains roaring in fury. She saw fear and anger, loss and betrayal, but also moments of hesitation, moments where he had paused before striking, moments when he had chosen mercy instead of cruelty. Lucian stepped forward, watching her face. "What do you see?" he asked, voice low, almost afraid of the answer. Serena met his eyes, her own reflecting both understanding and sorrow. "Your darkness," she said softly. "The curse you carry, it binds him as it binds you. The stallion's fire is your fire, Lucian. It is anger, grief, and longing all at once. It is part of you, and it will not be broken by force." Lucian swallowed, the word striking him harder than any blow.
And how do you know this? I do not, she admitted. I only feel it.
But I know that only care, patience, and trust can change what fear cannot. The glow of the clearing intensified, and the forest seemed to shift around them. Shadows twisted, forming shapes that were not quite human and not quite beast. Serena stepped forward, placing her hand on the black stallion's neck. Its eyes, wide with tension, locked on the shapes emerging from the darkness. Then a voice whispered, soft and insistent, curling through the mist like smoke. He will not change unless he faces himself. Serena glanced at Lucian, whose face was pale in the moonlight. You must face it, she said gently. Your power, your darkness. It will not yield unless you see it for what it is. Lucian's jaw tightened. He had faced armies, assassins, betrayal, and war. Yet the fear rising in his chest now was unlike anything he had known. It was fear of truth, fear of vulnerability, fear of losing control. And yet he felt the quiet strength radiating from Serena, from the stallion, and from the light itself. He stepped forward slowly, placing a hand on the horse's broad shoulder. Serena's touch met his, and for a brief moment, the three of them, the maid, the lord, and the beast, stood united. The shadows in the clearing twisted and writhed, testing them, but they did not falter. A sudden movement caught Serena's eye. From the edge of the forest a figure emerged, a phantom of black mist, twisting into a shape that seemed both familiar and terrifying. It was the curse itself, ancient and patient, feeding on fear and darkness. The black stallion snorted, stamping the ground, its hooves leaving deep impressions in the soft earth. Serena held her ground. We do not fight with swords, she whispered, but with courage and trust. Lucian's hand gripped the dagger at his side, though he did not raise it. His eyes were fixed on the phantom, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. Then we face it together, he said, his voice steady despite the storm within. The phantom lunged, and the clearing seemed to twist with magic older than the fortress itself. Shadows reached toward them, but the stallion reared, letting out a deafening roar that echoed through the trees. Serena's hand pressed against its mane, channeling calm into the beast, into the clearing, into the very air around them. The phantom recoiled, then shifted, circling, testing the strength of the bond that held them. Lucian stepped forward fully, placing himself between Serena and the shadow. He did not strike. He did not fight. He breathed, steadying himself, letting the presence of the maid and the stallion anchor him. The phantom hesitated, sensing a change, sensing that the darkness it had long thrived upon was now confronted by unity, not force. Serena whispered to the stallion, and the creature responded, lowering its head, its breath mingling with hers. Light flowed from her touch, not harsh or blinding, but steady and warm. Lucian felt it touch him, warming the frost that had long held his heart. The phantom shrieked, a sound like breaking stone, and then wavered, dissolving slowly into mist that drifted harmlessly into the trees. For a moment silence reigned. The clearing glowed softly, moonlight filtering through the mist, illuminating the three of them. Serena's eyes shone with relief, and the black stallion lowered its head, nuzzling her gently. Lucian felt his chest loosen, the tight grip of anger and fear melting slightly under the weight of something he had not allowed himself to feel for years. Hope. You did it, he said finally, his voice quiet but full of awe. You. All of you. He paused, swallowing against the lump in his throat. I did not know this was possible. Serena met his gaze, her own calm yet resolute. It was not about winning, she said softly. It was about facing what has always been within you, and what you were too afraid to see. Lucian's eyes softened, a flicker of vulnerability showing through the cold mask he had always worn. And the stallion? He asked, looking down at the black beast that now seemed almost serene. Serena stroked the creature's mane. He is free to choose now, and so are you. For the first time, Lucian realized the truth of her words. Freedom was not taking control, Nor was it wielding fear as a weapon. It was letting go of the chains they had both carried. Chains of anger, pride, and unspoken grief. And for that he needed her, just as much as the stallion did. But even as the clearing lay quiet, the wind whispered warnings. The curse had not disappeared, it had only tested them. Something deeper, older, still watched from the shadows. And though they had faced the phantom together, the forest held other secrets yet to reveal, secrets that could unravel everything if they were not careful. Serena glanced toward Lucian. "We are not done," she said, voice soft but firm. "The darkness still waits, and it is patient." Lucian nodded, the weight of her words settling over him. "Then we prepare," he said, "together." The black stallion whinnied softly, nuzzling Serena once more before turning its gaze toward the dense forest. Its stance was calm, alert, and unyielding, a reflection of the bond they had forged. Serena felt its pulse beneath her hands, steady and strong, and for the first time she felt certain that they could face whatever came next. The mist swirled again, drifting toward the fortress, carrying secrets of the night. Lucian's hand brushed Serena's briefly, a simple touch, yet heavy with unspoken promise. They had survived the first trial, but the heart of darkness still awaited them, and when it came it would demand more than courage. It would demand the truth of who they were, and what they could become together. And in the silence of the forest, with the moonlight washing over them, and the black stallion standing guard, Serena knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The dawn broke slowly over the fortress, painting the black stone towers in pale gold. Rain-soaked clouds lingered above, and the sea below churned like molten glass. Within the walls, silence reigned. It was not the silence of peace, but the quiet before the storm, the moment when choices were weighed and destinies decided. Serena stood in the stables, her hand resting on the black stallion's smooth neck. The beast had been restless the night before, its powerful body tense with anticipation, as if it sensed the final trial approaching. Lucian stepped into the stable, his coat damp from the early mist. His eyes, usually sharp and unreadable, were softened by something new. Reflection, fear, and a fragile hope. For nights they had faced shadows together, in the fortress, in the storm, in the forest where the heart of the curse had tested them. And now, the final confrontation loomed, not with enemies outside the walls, but with a darkness that had always lingered within Lucian himself. He approached Serena slowly, uncertain. "Are you ready?" he asked. Serena nodded, her hand steady on the stallion's mane. "I am," she said. "But are you ready?" Lucian's jaw tightened. He had spent years hiding from himself, hiding from weakness, hiding from love. And now he realized that the final test was not about strength or power, but about surrender. Surrender to truth, to trust, to the possibility of change.
I
will try," he said, his voice low but honest. The black stallion stamped its hooves, sensing the tension, and let out a low, resonant neigh. Serena's hand rested lightly on its massive head, and a calm pulse radiated through the creature, through her, and toward Lucian. The fortress seemed to hold its breath. Then the shadows appeared, crawling along the walls of the stables and the ground outside. The curse had not vanished. It had lingered, patient and waiting, feeding on doubt, fear, and pride. The mist twisted, forming shapes that reflected Lucian's deepest regrets, betrayals, lost friends, moments of cruelty he could not undo. Serena stepped forward, placing herself between Lucian and the shadows. "It is time," she whispered. "Face it, not with anger, not with swords, but with your heart." Lucian inhaled deeply. The images of the past pressed upon him, heavy as stone, threatening to crush him. He felt the urge to lash out, to command, to control. But the calm strength of Serena, the trust in the black stallion, and the warmth of the life she carried, reminded him of something he had almost forgotten. Redemption was not taken, it was chosen. He closed his eyes and for the first time let the weight of his guilt and pride settle into his hands rather than his chest.
I accept it, he said aloud, his voice steady.
I accept my past, and I choose to change. The shadows paused, hissing softly like a storm held in suspense. Serena placed a hand over his, guiding his focus. The black stallion neighed once, loud and pure, and the dark forms recoiled. Light, faint at first, began to emerge from Serena's touch and Lucian's acceptance, flowing into the clearing of the stable and washing over the shadows. The shapes twisted violently, resisting, but the combined force of trust, courage, and honesty was stronger than fear. Slowly, the darkness began to dissolve, evaporating into mist that drifted harmlessly into the morning air. The fortress itself seemed to exhale, releasing decades of tension, cruelty, and sorrow. Lucian opened his eyes. The shadows were gone, and the black stallion lowered its head to Serena's shoulder, calm and free. He felt a warmth he had never known, a sense of possibility, of life beyond fear. Serena's hand rested on the stallion, then on his, and he realized that the power he had always sought outside himself had been here all along, in trust, in love, and in courage to face one's own heart. Serena's eyes shone with relief, but also quiet joy. "It is done," she said softly. "Not because we fought, but because we chose differently." Lucian's chest tightened. He had spent years wielding fear, commanding obedience, and keeping the world at a distance. And yet now, standing with Serena and the stallion, he understood that power without compassion was hollow, and strength without trust was fragile. He reached out, brushing her hair from her face gently. "You have changed me," he admitted, almost in disbelief.
I never thought it could happen.
Serena smiled faintly, her hand resting lightly on his chest. "We change when we are seen," she said. "Not for the world, not for fear, not for pride, but for someone who trusts enough to stay." The black stallion stamped once and then whinnied, circling them in a protective, almost ceremonial gesture. It had always been fierce, untouchable, a creature born of darkness and fire. And now it was calm, free, and alive with a quiet energy that reflected the bond between the three of them. Lucian knelt before the stallion, an act of humility he had never performed in his life. Serena watched, her heart heavy with emotion. "You do not have to bend to power to command respect," she said softly. "Sometimes surrendering to truth is the greatest strength." The wind carried the scent of the sea and the forest, fresh and cleansing. The fortress, once a place of fear and tyranny, now seemed transformed. Light filtered through the towers, illuminating the stone walls and the banners fluttering gently. Lucian stood, brushing the dirt from his coat, and for the first time he felt free, not from enemies, but from the weight of himself. "You are not afraid," Serena said, observing him. Lucian shook his head. "Not in the way I once was," he admitted. "Fear will always exist, but I will not let it rule me." She smiled, a small, quiet smile that spoke of hope, trust, and the life yet to come. "Then you are truly free," she said. The black stallion neighed one final time, a sound that echoed through the fortress and beyond, over the cliffs and the waves. It galloped toward the open grounds, wild and untamed, yet bound by trust rather than fear. Serena watched, her hand on her belly, feeling the pulse of life within her and the pulse of life around her. Lucian stepped beside her, silent for a moment, then reached for her hand. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together." Serena's hand tightened around his. "Together," she repeated, and for a long moment, the three of them, the Lord, the Maid, and the black stallion, stood in quiet triumph. They had faced shadows, curses, fear, and doubt. They had confronted the darkness within themselves and chosen a path of trust, courage, and redemption. The fortress, once a place of cruelty and power, seemed to hum with a new energy. Windows reflected the rising sun, the towers no longer menacing but proud. The sea's waves clashed against the cliffs, strong and steady, carrying away the last remnants of storm and shadow. Lucian turned to Serena, his expression softening. "You have changed everything," he said. "Not just the stallion, not just me, but this place, this life, our lives." Serena's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "And you have changed too," she said. "Not by force, but by choosing to face what has always been here. Courage, not cruelty. Trust, not fear. Love, not isolation." The black stallion returned, trotting gracefully toward them, nostrils flaring, mane flowing like liquid night. It nuzzled Serena once, then Lucian, before standing silently between them, as if acknowledging the bond that had formed. Lucian knelt again, this time not out of submission to the beast, but out of gratitude and understanding. "I do not deserve this peace," he admitted softly. Serena shook her head. "We all deserve the chance to be better," she said, "and now you are." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the promise of a new day. The curse had been confronted, the darkness faced, and a bond forged in trust and courage. Life, once uncertain and fragile, now felt rich with possibility. Lucian looked at Serena, placing a hand on her belly gently. "For them," he whispered, "and for us." Serena nodded, a serene smile spreading across her face. "For all of us," she said. The black stallion whinnied once more, then galloped to the horizon, free and wild, a living testament to courage, trust, and redemption. Lucian and Serena watched hand in hand as the creature disappeared into the rising sun. The fortress, the stallion, and the lives within it had all changed. And in the calm of the morning, the fortress whispered a single truth. Even the darkest hearts could find light. Even the fiercest storms could pass, and even the strongest chains could be broken by trust, courage, and love. They turned toward the fortress together, their steps steady and sure. The world was no longer ruled by fear, but by the quiet strength of hearts brave enough to face themselves.